waiting for somebody to call this meeting to order. And Chip said, it's been called into order. You're up. I'm like, really? You wouldn't believe this, but I got caught up talking and got distracted.
You? Oh, no kidding. I believe you too.
Yes, sir, I do. I did. All right. So question number 2 tonight, or number 3, my number 2, your number 3, is can somebody please clarify the alleged parallel laws during the Mosaic period? I don't think so. Anyway, no, I don't know. I was like, parallel laws. Maybe I'm just not that well studied, but I did have to look this one up a little bit. And by parallel laws during the Mosaic period, it is meant all of the societies and cultures that had parallel laws, referring to the similarities between the legal codes of ancient Israel and other ancient Near Eastern societies, such as the Code of Hammurabi. Now, that is a Babylonian legal document from like 1755 to 1750 BC. And so it gives you some insight into what was important to that society as far as the law was concerned. And it's very interesting to see the similarities in all of that. I would say that there is a stark contrast between the Code of Hammurabi and the Old Testament law that was given on Sinai. But while ancient Israelite law shares common themes and structures and subjects with its neighbors, it's not just distinct because of its theological framework. It's distinct in the entire purpose for some of the rules, and I'll show you some of that here in just a minute, what we're talking about. Now, Jews and Gentiles have historically had have y'all heard of the Noahide laws? Well, there's what is called 7 laws of Noah. Now, you can't go in your Bible and see this, okay? This is outside biblical literature. And where they're getting this from is the Talmud, which is a commentary on the Mishnah. The Talmud is made up of about 63 different treatises that cover a wide variety of subject area, and with a heavy emphasis on Mesopotamian law. The Mishnah is probably the first written collection of Jewish oral traditions that are known as the Oral Torah. And you're looking at a date about 3rd century, and it's dealing with a lot of rabbinic commentary and literature that reaches really far back to the times before Christ, which I think is kind of interesting that they would have something to say about it. But if you ask what are the 7 laws of Noah, not a biblical definition, but from the extra-biblical sources, we're talking about prohibitions against idolatry, prohibitions against blasphemy, murder, theft, incest and adultery, sexual sins, eating flesh from a living animal, and the requirement to establish courts of justice. You know, there goes the child abduction alerts. And so when you look at, if you really want to look at some Bible, you know, if you want to put something around Noah's time, one of the first laws after the flood is in Genesis 9 and 6. Whosoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made man. That's addressing murder. That was the first law that you can read about in your Bible during the time of Noah, right after the flood. In Genesis 9 and verse number 23, we would look at it as kind of a doctrine of implication, But modesty and respect for mom and dad, honoring mom and dad, is seen in Genesis 9, verse number 23, when Shem and Japheth took a garment when Noah was drunk and naked in his tent and laid it on both of their shoulders, and they walked backwards and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned away so that they did not see their father's nakedness. That is something that comes up in the book of Genesis, but we can make a deduction there that it was prior to the law of Moses, and therefore it probably became common law to that period of time to those people, that drunkenness had its consequences and that murder was wrong. Those rules came from God in the first place, and therefore man adopted it over a period of time. I think it's so interesting to see all the different cultures. I think it's interesting to see the Code of Hammurabi. It's not the Bible, but it tells you that there were some lines that men and women could not cross as far as their conduct was concerned. And I'll tell you something else about moral codes and laws of the land. Almost nobody can live it perfectly all the time. There's always going to be some. It's like you getting a speeding ticket. You know it's wrong, but you might get a ticket from time to time. And so it's impossible to not violate some kind of law. If we were left to our own devices, if we didn't have a higher code of morality, a higher code of ethics to which we appeal, why would we make any of these laws that would seemingly punish us? If you look at the Bible, the laws that are in the Bible, that's not written by man. And I think when you're talking about how to prove there is God, or that God is existent, that a moral argument is very convincing. It has a lot of weight. And so atheism doesn't provide any kind of basis for a moral law. When we sit down and we start debating laws and rules and you did me wrong, and well, no, I did not. Yes, you did. Yes, you done me wrong. Well, to what law are we making an appeal when we say, you have mistreated me, you have done me wrong? Well, it's a higher law. If there is no God, none of us has the right to make a rule. And so when we talk about, can somebody clarify these alleged parallel laws during the Mosaic period? It's simply to say that the law of Moses was written to the Jews. It was not for everybody. It was not for the general populace. Let me show you back a little bit further. Now, this is pre-Abraham, but remember the Tower of Babel? This appeals to the issue of pride, or addresses the issue of pride. Genesis 11, verse number 4. These people came together and said, let's build ourselves a city. Let's build a tower up to the top of the heavens. I think what they mean is let's build a skyscraper. And really where the sin is, I don't think it's the sin in building the building so much. You might disagree with that, but I think the idea of let's make a name for ourselves. What kind of request were they making? Let's make a name for ourselves. Who were they? They were the people of God. They were the offspring of Noah. Why did they need to make a name for themselves? Is it about them? I guess they had forgotten who God was. Let's make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad the face of the whole earth. And in verse number 9, therefore the name of the place was called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord scattered them abroad all the face. You know, one of the greatest arguments for the existence of God is the existence of all the languages. How do we get all of our languages? You take all of our languages and they go back to one language. You can trace them back to, and there's similarities in all the language. Genesis chapter 12, verse number 12. This addresses adultery. Abraham and Sarah, they're going down to Egypt, and he's thinking, when the Egyptians see you, Sarah, they're going to think, man, this is whack. They're going to kill me. They're going to let you live. So why don't you tell them you're my sister? You agree. You just tell them you're my sister. And of course, in chapter 12 and verse 19, Pharaoh's like, why did you say she's my sister? I might have taken her as my wife. Now, therefore, here's your wife. Take her and go away. So this addresses adultery, or the possibility thereof. It addresses lying. These were moral codes that that were not supposed to be broken even in that day and time. In Genesis chapter 7 and verse number 2, this, again, predates the law of Moses, but I think it's interesting that God was distinguishing between the clean and unclean animals as to what was supposed to go on the ark. You shall take with you 7 of every clean animal, male and female, and 2 each of the animals that are unclean is male and female. And then Genesis 7 and verse 8, of clean animals and of animals that are unclean, of birds and of everything that creeps on the earth. That's what's supposed to go on the ark. Chapter 7, verse 19 of Leviticus. Now we're into the Old Testament. We're into the law of Moses now. We got Jews on scene now. The flesh that touches any unclean thing shall not be eaten. It shall be burned with fire. And as for the clean flesh, all who are clean may eat it. He's seeing the difference between clean and unclean. We're not talking about just the code of Hammurabi anymore. We're talking about a law that sets this nation apart by their understanding of what's clean and unclean. Leviticus 10 and verse number 10, the whole purpose of all of this law was so that they could distinguish between what was holy and what was unholy, what was clean and unclean. And then the priest in Leviticus 14:57 were to teach what is clean and unclean, especially in regard to the law of leprosy. That same sentiment is echoed over in Ezekiel chapter 44:23. Teach my people to know the difference between holy and unholy, and cause them to discern the difference between clean and unclean. And then there's Melchizedek. He was before the law of Moses. And you can look at Hebrews chapter 7, verse number 1. This Melchizedek was the king of the city of Salem and a priest of the Most High God. And Abram, when he was returning home after winning a great battle against the kings, Melchizedek met him and he blessed him. And Abraham took 1/10 of all that he had and captured in battle and gave it to Melchizedek. This was a tithe of the spoils. And the name of Melchizedek, the Hebrew says, that means king of justice. You see, Melchizedek lived in the patriarchal dispensation, under patriarchal law. He didn't live under the time period of the law of Moses, and even if he did, he might not have been what you call a Jew or an Israelite. And so that law wasn't for him, but the fact that he existed, the fact that he was a monarch, the fact that he had a law to which he appealed, the fact that he offered sacrifices. You've got a name that means king of justice, means he understands the difference between just and unjust. And the king of Salem, which was Jerusalem later, but Salem, that part of the name means king of peace. He understands what makes for peace. Consider verse number 4 then how great this Melchizedek was. Even Abraham, the great patriarch of Israel, recognized this by giving him 1/10 of what he had taken in the battle. Now the law of Moses required that priests who are descendants of Levi must collect a tithe from the rest of the people of Israel who were also descendants of Abraham. But Melchizedek, who was not a descendant of Levi, collected 1/10 from Abraham. And Melchizedek placed upon Abraham a blessing. And of course the less was blessed of the better. Well, that is a moral law. That is a law to which Melchizedek appealed. And you could say under patriarchy that God dealt directly with the fathers of the families. Well, if that's the way God did during the time of Hammurabi, during that time of that Babylonian Empire, don't you think they got some of their ideas from patriarchy? Doesn't that make sense where they would get those ideas? You fast forward to the time of Cornelius over in Acts chapter 10. I don't think he was a proselyte. The Bible doesn't say he was. He was just one of those Gentile dudes out there. And what does the Bible say of Cornelius? He was a devout man who feared God. He believed in the one true God. He wasn't a Jew. He didn't have to be a Jew to believe in the one true God and to be a devout man which feared God with all of his household. He gave alms generously to the people and prayed to God always. Did he do that because of the spiritual cues that the Jews were giving out through the law of Moses? Maybe. Or maybe he had known for centuries, or maybe what he knew had been passed down for centuries in his family or in his culture, in his society. You don't know where he got the idea for being a devout man who feared God. It doesn't say he got it from the law of Moses. What's the point, though? The point is simply this. Even in Romans, the 2nd chapter, the Bible tells us the Gentiles who do not have the law of Moses, by nature, do those things in the law. These, although not having the law of Moses, he's talking about, are a law unto themselves, who show the work of the law written in their hearts, their conscience also bearing witness between themselves, their thoughts accusing or else excusing them. Notice in verse 16, in the day when the Lord will judge the secrets of men. What's going to happen in the day when the Lord will judge the secrets of men by Jesus Christ according to the gospel? Their conscience is going to be judged. What was their conscience seasoned by if they didn't have the law of Moses? Patriarchy. And maybe God had stopped talking to the fathers of the family directly after the law of Moses was given. Let's just say they would still have the patriarchal influence, if you want to call it that. Where are they going to get their ideas for being God-fearing? Where are they going to get their ideas for having a conscience? Where are they going to get their ideas for right and wrong? My friends, it's the same place that an atheist does today. We've always gotten our sense and our conscience of what is right and wrong. Ultimately, always and forever, has always been God. Right. Never any other place. And that, my friends, is a powerful argument, especially for your atheists.